Are you the type of person that wants everything right now? Let's take the next hour and unplug from this world and plug into a biblical perspective where we're going to see that it's a process. Hear the stories of people from all over the world whose lives have been radically transformed through the Word of God. Welcome to Charis Unplugged. Hi everybody, it's Julianne Harris here again with another episode of Charis Unplugged. This is a weekend episode, so we get to deep dive into a testimony, and I'm so excited for all you're going to hear today and the goodness of God. And I want to encourage you once again, as we share testimonies with you, because that's all we do here on Charis Unplugged, if you hear something that is a desire of your heart to be set free from something, to see provision in an area, and you hear this happening in somebody else's life, you grab hold of it and say, yes, God, I want that for me. And He is so ready to give that to you. So without further ado, let me introduce you to actually my boss. I just kind of
it still sounds weird to me.
It does to me too as well. But how fun is that? So this is Angeles Jonske. And so welcome on the program today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's so awesome. And so we have been planning on doing this now for a few months. Yeah. And she was kind of one of those that we were like, ooh, we got somebody else in. Angeles can do it next month. And so finally, you are here and you have such a powerful testimony. And so I know the viewers are going to be blessed. So what is your current title in the ministry right now?
Yep. It's Director of Original GTN Shows.
Okay. So you're over all the producers of all the shows.
Yes. And some writers too.
And some writers as well. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, you're a little bit busy.
Just a little bit.
Just a
And then I help with film and production school too.
Oh
so
yeah, you do that. Yeah, you're just a little bit busy.
Good.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So I always like to start with the first question and then we see where the conversation goes. Were you always a lover of the Word?
No.
No.
But I was always in church. So I was raised in church. But I didn't understand the power of the Word and that it was living. It was, to me, it was just a book, and it was just a book of a bunch of rules.
Yes.
And things we could do and couldn't do.
You know, isn't that interesting? Because it was just a book to me too, but I heard somebody say this and I thought that makes sense, is how like, as you and I, because I'm sure you went to public school as well. So you go to school, you're hearing this is what truth is. And then on the weekends, we would hear Bible stories.
Yes.
And it was almost this kind of concept of like, this is just a storybook or a book of rules. Yeah. But this other is like, isn't that interesting? So
and it's interesting because even though it was you study the books that are given to you in school.
Yeah.
But I never studied the Bible.
I know.
I don't know. If I would have, I probably would have been much better off.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but you grew up in church. Where did you grow up?
I was born in Denver, but
okay.
my dad was in the military there, and he wanted to move back to his hometown, which was in the middle of nowhere in Missouri.
Okay.
A very small town of about 300 and some people.
Oh, wow.
There were actually 3 of us towns that went to school together. One town had the elementary school, one had the middle school, and one had the high school.
Wow.
So we just like combined. And so there were like 34 people in my class, and we had one of the biggest classes.
Yay!
So it was kind of cool in the sense that like it was like a family, because we were so, it was just an intimate family, which is great. It was a great upbringing. Yeah. My dad wanted to go back and farm with his dad, and it was like a 5-generation farm.
Oh, wow.
And so,
how old were you when you moved from Denver back there?
Oh, very small.
You were,
didn't even remember, like less than a year probably.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my whole life I grew up in this town of just, really small. And so my parents always were in church. Anytime the doors were open, my mom was the secretary sometime, for a while of the pastor. And my dad was really into, they had like a band section and everything. And so he was really into that. And they always had us, always had to be there when the doors were open.
But you're going to church, but you're not in the Word.
Mm-mm.
And so what did your growing up years, like on into high school and stuff like that, what did that look like for you?
I was a good girl.
You
good
were?
Girl next door.
Wow.
Didn't do anything wrong. I was very obedient to my parents. I had a really good group of friends, and my parents had a good group of friends that were all from the church and everything. And there were a couple of people, like my youth pastors and my Sunday school teacher. I saw glimpses of what a relationship with God was, but my parents did not have us like read the Bible together as a family or do, it was just, you know, we went to church, we had the rituals, but we never like, I never saw them reading the Bible, I never saw them praying. So I just didn't have that kind of upbringing, but morally, things were great. You know, I stayed out of trouble until I was about 16, 17 years old. My parents decided to go on a vacation, and that we were old enough that I was old enough to stay in the house by myself. But my grandparents were just up the road if I needed anything. And so I had just gotten a boyfriend, snuck him out of the house. We went to my first party because my parents would not let me go to any kind of parties or anything like that. So went to my first party, ended up rolling my car and totaling my car. And then my grandparents drove by our house and they're like, Angie, somebody stole your car. And I'm like, no, it's like in the ditch.
You fessed up to it?
Well, what else was I supposed to do?
You could have been like, gosh, somebody did steal my car.
So the bad thing was I hated this car and I thought, oh good, I'm going to get a new car. No, my grandfather and my dad rolled it back over and and it worked. So I had to drive the car looking uglier than it did before. But no, it was my first glimpse of starting to be a little bit of rebellious in there.
So did you get in a bunch of trouble from your parents?
Because I told the truth, my parents actually were more concerned with how I was because I had a concussion. I was very sore the next day. I had rolled it. It was even worse than that. God was completely, there even during that part of my life because when I rolled it, I got all turned around. I didn't know what direction I was in, and I was in the country. There were no lights anywhere, and it was snowing, and I had a t-shirt and jeans on.
Oh my goodness,
I literally walked in the country not knowing where I was for about 3 hours, and I almost laid in the ditch and just gave up because I was so cold. I didn't know where I was. I couldn't find anybody to help me, and I was just exhausted. And so, but something in me was like, keep going. And eventually I came to this light I saw, and this guy had just gotten home from being away, and he knew who my dad was. And so he took me home. Wow.
That is supernatural that you're even alive.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure.
So they were just like, praise God you're alive.
Yeah. And because like I said, because I told the truth, they just, I didn't really have any repercussions, and I hadn't really done anything like that before. It was kind of my first time. So so they did have a lot of grace.
But that did start.
It did start some, it absolutely ended up, this is the guy that he proposed to me. He wasn't saved. But I told, and it was our senior year of high school. He proposed to me, and I said, I was raised and with enough knowledge, I knew you shouldn't be unequally yoked. So I told him, I'm like, I know you're not saved right now. I know you're not living, for God and everything, and I just can't say yes. So the next week he comes to me and he said, oh, by the way, I got saved. And his parents had started coming to our church, so he was in church, but they didn't really, they hadn't received Jesus yet. They were just being, so I thought, oh, wow, he's saved. And then he got baptized. So I'm like, this is great. So we ended up getting engaged. He was like the very first boy that I really had gotten serious about and everything. And so we got engaged, got married within a year. Even though our parents wanted us to wait until we graduated from college. So we were like sophomores in college when we got married. Things started getting rough because finances, and we were, the world, the reality of the world out on your own just kind of came together and everything.
Oh, it's painful.
It was very painful.
Because it's like, we'll live on love.
Yes.
Yeah, no, you can't live on love.
That lasted about a month, maybe.
Exactly.
And so, things just got a little bit hard. We both couldn't be in college, so my husband had dropped out of college, so I could keep going for a while, and he was going to work. And then eventually we were going to have him go to college. But he just, there was a lot we didn't know about each other, and we were young. There was a lot I didn't know about him. I didn't realize he never stopped dating. And
even though he got married to you? Oh, well, there's that.
And so I found out he'd been cheating on me and everything, and he was a mama's boy. he couldn't do anything without his parents, couldn't do, and so that caused some issues and some conflicts in our relationship too. So he ended up getting a job out in Colorado, in Denver. We went to go stay with my grandparents because all my mom's side of the family lived in Denver.
So even though you found out he was cheating on you,
I didn't know what else to do, and
right.
I cared about him and everything. But it was also it was kind of like all this stuff at once started happening. I found out he was cheating on me, but he denied it.
Okay.
So you start second guessing.
Right.
Am I really is this right, or am I wrong, or something like that? So kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt in some ways that way.
Right.
Then he started taking money from our checking account, and I was the one in charge of paying the bills.
Right.
So I'd be writing checks, and all of a sudden there was no money, and we'd get these bounced checks back. And I'm like, what's going on? And so this one day, we were supposed to receive checks in the mail because we'd run out.
Right.
And so I went to look for them, and I didn't find them. So I was a little bit concerned somebody took them from the mailbox. I started investigating and everything, and found somebody had been writing the checks from those.
Oh my goodness.
So I went to the bank, and I'm like, somebody's stolen our checks. I'm freaking out. I'm trying to find out what's going on. And they showed me the checks, and it was his signature on them.
Oh my goodness.
So I confronted him, and I'm like, I thought you said you didn't know the checks had been delivered here. I went to the bank. I told him the situation, and he still denied it. And he has a very distinct signature.
Yeah.
And a very distinct handwriting that's different. So this started a progression of a lot of lying on his part.
Wow.
And he was so convincing that it makes you think you're going crazy.
It makes you think, and then plus there's a part of you that wants to believe that.
Absolutely.
Like, okay,
Absolutely.
well then that makes sense.
And it was a side I'd never seen of him before.
Right.
So it was just very like, wait a minute, what is going on?
Wow.
And everything. So that started about 6 years of it progressing into more and more things where it would be
6 years of it?
Yeah.
So during this time, I'm guessing you're not in the Word. Are you guys
not at all? We actually
are you going
ended
to
up
church?
We stopped going to church because I don't really know if he actually did receive Jesus and was born again.
Wow.
Because after we got married and after he got that commitment, the church, he didn't want to go to church anymore.
Oh wow.
And then eventually I stopped going to church.
Right.
Because he wasn't. And it was just a really rough situation. So he got offered a job in Denver. And so I thought, oh, maybe if we separate from family a little bit,
that'll help.
Get
away from
he'll
mama.
Grow up and things will get better. And things got worse.
Oh,
now I'm in this city where I do, my mom's family is there and everything, but I'm not super close because I didn't grow up around them.
Right.
So I wasn't over at their house all the time or anything like that, and I didn't have the relationship to really talk to them, in a deep way.
Right.
And so I'm in this city all alone. He starts just not coming home some days for 2 or 3 days, or he'd come home to change clothes and leave again. And
what was his excuse?
He had to go and do work late at night, or he had to go deliver. He worked for a car dealership, or he'd have to deliver a car that was a long ways away, or different things like that. And it just, nothing was adding up. Everything was just not adding up. Eventually I got pregnant.
Okay.
So I thought, oh, well, maybe now he'll grow up. And things got worse.
Wow.
And so he wasn't really around whenever, not too much when I was pregnant, but he did end up going to Lamaze classes with us, with me, and there were hints of okay, maybe things are going to get better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then I had the baby.
Mm-hmm.
He was there for the baby. He did come to the hospital. He drove me to the hospital, everything like that. We come home, and all of a sudden he doesn't want anything to do with the baby or me. And I'm like, this is really weird. So it was almost like I was raising her by myself.
Wow.
He didn't want to hold her. He didn't want to really so they didn't have that connection or anything. Right. And he would be like, oh, I'm just afraid, that I'll drop her. But the weird thing is that he had a little brother that was I don't know, 16 years younger than him. Okay. So he was used to he helped raised the brother and everything. So whenever the brother was really young, so I'm like, it didn't make sense to me.
Did you cry out to God during any of this time?
No, I didn't know to do that or that I could, because I was raised with rules and regulations, not God is
So
there
you
for
can't,
us and everything.
right? So you can't cry out to God because after all, you hadn't been going to church, you hadn't done
Right.
all the stuff that.
And it never even crossed my mind. Like it
Wow.
amazes me when I hear people's testimonies
Yeah.
of when they cried out to God.
Yeah.
Because like I just didn't even know that was an option.
Wow.
That I was so just like naive to that
Yeah.
side of him,
Right.
which was just as sad, but it's
Wow.
just the reality of what it was.
Right.
So yeah, so I didn't know what to do. I just, I took care of her, but then he would not come home in the middle of the night. I would be calling my mom at 2 or 3 in the morning and be like, Mom, Kyle's not here. What if he's in a car accident? And I just always, my mind went to, he can't be doing anything bad.
Right. He's not on purpose.
What if he's like dead somewhere?
Right.
And then I'm all alone.
Yeah.
That's where my mind went every single time, even though he always would show up at some point. I just
Wow.
was always like in this like anxiety driven state all
Yeah.
night long.
Yeah.
And then trying to also function and raise a daughter at the same time.
Wow.
So,
That's so much.
in the meantime of this whole thing, my brother had gotten married. None of us really met her because he knew her for a couple months.
Okay.
Had one of those kind of like weddings and everything. But I started talking to her on the phone, and we became friends that way. And she invited me out to their house, which was in California. They had just had a baby that was about 5 months, born 5 months before our daughter
Okay.
was. And so they were around the same age. And they're like, we'd love to meet, your daughter. We would love for you to meet your nephew, come
Yeah.
out and see us. And so I went out there to see him. And it was a great time. I was only going to be gone for a week, ended up staying longer than a week. And then that week turned into a few months, which turned into longer. My husband never tried to get in touch with us or anything. He just, it was like, aren't you going, there was not that initiative to find out, are you coming home? Do you want to come home? What's going on?
Not at
I'd love
all?
to talk to you. Nothing. There was nothing.
Could you get a hold of him? I mean, did you talk at all during that?
I tried to, but he was never home. He just didn't have.
And that was before cell phone.
Yeah, it was before cell
all
phones
that
and
stuff,
everything
yeah.
like that. So, or he would talk to me for a few minutes when I'd call, but he'd like, I gotta go. So it was always like, there was just that disinterest, and you could
Yeah.
just sense the
Yeah.
disinterest in there and everything. So, in the meantime, my sister-in-law, she was a party girl. My brother didn't know that when he married her. She was a gambler. She was into drugs, that whole thing. So she's like, hey, do you want to go to a club with me one night? Started at the club.
Okay.
And so I had drinks. I never got drunk. I never was a drinker growing up. I had that really good girl type of girl next door type
Wow.
of thing.
Yeah.
Never had any desire to have a drink or anything.
Right.
But it's like I was dealing with so much loneliness
Yeah.
at that time and felt, just betrayed in a lot of ways, abandoned in a lot of ways and
Yeah.
everything. And so to step aside from the responsibility of a daughter, my brother watched her. I went out and I was drunk for the first time.
Okay.
And I had fun for the first time in like a long time.
Right.
And
right.
everything, and just experienced, my sister-in-law just gave me attention I'd been longing for.
Right.
And like she felt like we were like sisters, and I'm like, somebody wants to hang out with me and be with me that's an adult, and it just was like very magnetic to me.
Right.
And
right.
so she just really showed a lot of interest, which at first was great.
Yeah.
I started going out more with her and being less with my daughter. And my brother was like the in-between. He was like, we used to call him like Lawrence Welk, because he was like an old soul in a young body.
Right. So he would prefer
younger
to
than
stay
me,
home.
but
Right.
he was the adult of, of the family at that time. And so, so he just, he watched her a lot. I started going out a lot. Eventually my sister-in-law, we just started going out more and more.
Yeah.
And eventually she was like, you should just stay with us, live with us. Kyle obviously doesn't want anything to do with you guys. Why don't you just live here? And then you could figure out what's going on with your life and everything.
Right.
And it always sounded like it was coming from, we're here for you, let me help you, I'm there for you type of thing. And so I made the decision to do that. So I did call Kyle, let him know we were going to stay there. We weren't coming back. And he was just like, okay.
Wow.
Didn't fight for us, didn't try to
Which
talk
hurts
me
even
into
more. Like,
yeah.
wow.
So it just was confirmation of what I already felt from him. But I said, would you like to see your daughter? You know, because my sister-in-law was like, you should have Kyle come and get her for a couple weeks so you can like find a job, since now you know you're going to stay with us.
Right.
And you can get things established. So I'm like, that's probably a good idea. Not even thinking anything else. So I called Kyle, got a hold of him, and he's like, yeah, I would love to see her. Well, in the background was his parents, and they were kind of making plans I wasn't aware of or anything like that. So he came and got Kira, and he with a plane ticket to come bring her back in 2 weeks, and everything, with the understanding to bring her back in 2 weeks. Gave her, you know, all the food, formula, everything that I had, so he had everything he needed. So when she was gone, we stepped it up a little bit more. You know, my sister-in-law was gambling. I was in the bars. You know, she introduced me to the first time to marijuana.
Okay.
Never had done anything like that before. And then this one night she said to me, you know, I know you're going to be asked to do coke at some point. I want to be the one here with you to make sure nothing happens to you. Here it is. And showed me how to do it. And I just didn't even know what was going on at first. So I wanted to please her so much.
Right.
Because she was giving me attention.
Yeah.
And I didn't want her to not like me. So I took my first thing of coke, and had a really bad trip.
Really?
Really bad. I flipped out and had a horrible experience with it.
Yeah.
Which you would think would be a good thing.
Would be enough to, yeah, exactly.
But it wasn't. Things progressed from there and went to crystal meth really fast.
Wow.
And then I eventually started hanging out with her crowd nonstop. People who'd been doing it for 20 years. I was keeping up with them, not knowing that you don't just go from 0 to 100 that fast, typically with that. Thank goodness, you know, I didn't overdose and nothing really severely happened at that point. Right. Because, I mean, you know, it's like airplane fuel and everything else in the world.
Horrid. Yeah.
And things just got worse and worse and worse. So 2 weeks went by, and I was like, I haven't heard from Kyle. You know, I wonder when he's bringing Kira back. So I called him at our house in Denver to find out that the phone had been disconnected. So then I'm like, what's going on? So then I called his work and found out he was fired. And he hadn't been at work for a couple weeks. So I'm like, so I don't even know if he was at work or had that job when he came out to get her. So then I called my dad, who lived in the same town his parents did. Yeah. And I'm like, have you seen Kyle? Do you know if he's with his parents? And my dad knew nothing. So I'm like, okay. So I called Kyle's parents' house, and he answered the phone. And he didn't know that he did not expect me to answer anything. And because I could hear the shock in his voice. Right. And so I'm like, what's going on? I thought you were going to be bringing Kira back. And he's like, no, I've decided not to bring her back. And so at that point, my world just shattered in the sense of what is going on, what's happening here. And I just had little hints of the drugs and stuff, you know, I just started and stuff, but it was just more of a partying time. Right. At that moment, I just broke loose, and it was just, that was my world, was drugs and alcohol was all I did. Wow. I couldn't get it together enough to even figure out a plan or anything. I didn't know what to do. My sister-in-law was feeding me, like, she was just kind of like feeding the monster in the sense of my emotions, not thinking logically. You know, there wasn't somebody who was like, okay, let's take a deep breath. Yeah. Let's figure out what to do. Instead, I just went the opposite direction. You just went into a drug state of being. So I called my dad, and I told him what happened. Kyle wasn't, you know, wanting to give Kira back and everything. I said, can you help me? Can you go over there and talk to them, find out what's going on, and help me to get her back? And he's like, I don't want to get involved. Oh, wow. And that's the way my parents are like, we don't want involved. Like, even whenever there were things going on and I would cry in the middle of the night, we don't want to get involved. So I didn't feel that support. That support, right. Yeah, and so I felt like I was just kind of an island on my own, trying to figure things out and everything. So I went to legal aid, told them my situation, what happened, and they said, if she's not in your possession, we don't have jurisdiction. There's nothing we can do to help you. I called Missouri legal aid and I told them what happened. Because you don't live in Missouri and she's not in your possession, there's nothing we can do to help you. So the legal aid in California was finally like, you know, this is off the record, but we would recommend you go get her in your hands, bring her back here, file divorce papers, and then we'll have jurisdiction and we can fight from there. So I'm like, okay. So I decided to go and stay with my parents, with my mom, who lived about 20 miles away. I took a flight there and contacted Kyle, told him I was going to be in town for a while. Can I see Kira, at least see her? You know, didn't tell him what was going to happen or what my plan was.
Right.
And so he's like, no. And I said, Kyle, please, can I see my own daughter? And he's like, finally he said, well, as long as we go to a motel. I won't bring her to your parents' house. You can't come here, but we can go to a motel. So he gets off work at 9 o'clock that night. So so he comes to get me at 9 o'clock at night to take me to a hotel. He has Kiara with him. And so I get to see her from she's already asleep. She's a baby still.
Yeah.
So of course she's not going to be awake at 9 o'clock at night. The next morning he's like, I have to go to work. So you're going to have, you can only see her till 7 o'clock in the morning, which she wakes up about then. And then he's like, I have to go to work now. So we're going to have to leave. And I'm like, could she stay with me all day at my mom's house?
Yeah.
And then you go to work and then you come back and get her. And he said, no, not unless you give me your driver's license. So of course he probably knew I was going to try and do something that he did to me.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
And so I'm like, I'm not giving you my driver's license. Can she please stay with me? We just fought for a while and he said no. So he had a Jeep at the time and the top was down. So he was taking me to my parents' house, back to my mom's house. And so I went outside the Jeep to say it. I just went around to the back end and said goodbye to Kira outside of the Jeep. And I saw him and I was looking at him and watching Kyle. And he was, I don't know, whatever he was doing. And so I kind of slipped her out of the car seat and I grabbed her and I ran up to my parents' house. And so I'm pounding on the door. It's I think it's actually 5 in the morning. It's still really early. I'm pounding on the door for my mom to let me in. She comes to the door. She lets me in. She's like, what's going on? So I run in the house. I slam the door shut. I lock the door. And I said, don't let Kyle in. Yeah. And she's like, what's going on? And I think she had just woken up. So she was half awake, half asleep still. So I'm like, whatever you do, do not let Kyle in or I'm going to lose Kiara forever. Yeah. And she's like, what? No, no, no. And so Kyle's pounding on the door by that time. It's like a movie or something.
Oh, yeah.
He's just pounding on the door and I'm like, please don't let him in. Please don't let him in. I'm screaming. I'm freaking out. So my mom lets him in. And so she's like, you guys just need to calm down. Everybody needs to calm down. Kyle comes lunging at me and chasing me. So I'm running around the house. He's chasing me. Kiara's screaming at this time. My mom's like, please just calm down. Everybody calm down. And so Kyle's just coming after me physically.
Right.
And so finally my mom was like, let me have Kiara. So she gets Kiara from my arms and she immediately gives him to Kyle. And Kyle grabs some papers from his back pocket, throws them down on the ground, and runs out the door. And they were divorce papers. So what happened was because he had her in his hand, possession and he physically, filed. He automatically got custody until the court date would happen.
Wow.
And so at that time, I just was ballistic and completely lost it on my parents. And I just screamed, you know what you did right now? You just caused me to lose my daughter forever. And they were just oblivious. They were they just didn't get how he was because I had never fully told
them, so they didn't. Yeah, they didn't.
And so I called Linda up immediately at that time, and I'm like, I knew I shouldn't have come here. Told her what happened. She went ballistic as well on my parents and everything. Went ballistic on my brother. Just really lost it and everything. So I said, please get me a plane ticket out of here. I got to leave right now. And so my parents were actually scheduled to go away for a couple of days. Mm-hmm. Instead of, trying to stay and calm me down and to work through it and everything, they decided to leave still, but said, just stay and we'll be back in a couple of days. And to me, that was like, this traumatic thing just happened.
Yeah.
And you're still going to leave town. I'm out of here. That was just even more, you know, like abandonment to me in a sense. So I got on a plane, you know, ended up leaving, went back to California. The drugs got even worse. You know, just from then, I didn't even care. You know, if I died, overdosed, who cares? So I'm sitting in the bar one day, and I just said to God, this is my first discussion with God. And I said, I already know I'm going to hell. I don't even care anymore. Wow. That was the one talk, or the one cry out to him was like, I don't even care. Yeah. I'm okay with going to hell. Right. I'm already there. So how much worse could it get? That was my attitude. And I just didn't care about myself anymore, didn't care about anybody. And so I just went into, all day long, I was at the bar or we were at home and we were just constantly doing drugs. Wow. I never didn't have meth in me for the next like 9 months to a year. Wow. My goodness. And then it progressed even worse. I started writing bad checks for my sister-in-law. She asked me to write them once, and I said, and she's like, I'll pay you back. I just need to get a couple of things. But, you know, it's okay if you write them as long as you pay the bank back. So I'm like, okay, as long as you pay me back. So I wrote one. She never paid me back. I wrote a couple more because it made her happy. Yeah. She never paid me back. And then I'd start writing more. And they were all for like clothes for her or clothes for her kids or things that she would want. There was never even anything for me. Yeah. And so a couple of times I may have gotten a few outfits or something like that for going out, but it was always things for her because I saw it made her happy. Right. And then she gave me more attention. Yeah. So that was almost like a drug in a sense too. Yeah, what can I do to make her happy and get more attention? Yeah. And so so it was just a really messed up time. So one day we're all at home. We've done drugs and everything. And she's kind of in a bad mood. So I'm like, let's go to the mall then. And so like her eyes lit up and she's like, okay. And so we go to the mall and we went to the same place I'd been to 3 or 4 times and written bad checks. Really stupid.
I was gonna say not real smart.
So I write bad checks this day, and we're going up the escalator, and there's these guys in black walking up the escalator, and they say my name, and I turn around, and they're like, grab me by the arm, and they're like, we need you to come with me. Linda takes off out of the mall, and they've got me. And so we go to this room, and they're like, listen, they're like, what's going on? You know, we've got all this stuff. We've been watching you. We've been waiting for you to come back. You know, if you have your friend, just come back with the items she took. We'll let you go and you can go home now. So they had me call her and she's like, I'm not going back there. What, are you crazy? No, I'm not going back there. So because she wouldn't come back. So I told them everything that happened, naively admitting to more than I should have.
Oh no.
Not knowing I really would not get to go home. Wow. And so they had the police come and get me. And I was so naive to everything. I'm like, I had no street smarts at all or anything like this. So the police come and get me. I'm in the back of the car and realizing where my life has just led me to. Wow. And how messed up in just a matter of like 9 months. How extremely, from a good girl, good girl next door, to now I'm in the back of a police car.
Wow. Wow.
And it was a huge wake-up call in so many senses. I get to the jail. I'm like there all night. It takes them forever to book me. They book me on charges of fraud, on stealing, and they think I'm somebody else at the time that they've been looking for. And I'm not, and that's going to be found out later. But they think I'm pretending to be somebody else. Oh, wow. And I don't remember the whole story of that, but it was a lot more charges than really I should have even gotten at that point, because they didn't know who I really was. So they put me in a cell with a cellmate. Mm-hmm. It ended up being kind of like the leader of the whole, like kind of like the person that's a bully in charge of the whole jail cell. Oh, no. Everybody, like, you know, she's the one that tells, you know, the rules and all that stuff to people, and just the tough girl in there. And she literally, this is another like breadcrumb of God's hand being on me. She took me under her wing and protected me from the guards coming in at night, because the guards would come in to get girls at night. She protected me from when we were in the common area during the day of anybody like messing with me or anything.
Wow.
And it was like an angel in the sense of like, she would hear me crying all night long. I'd be crying all night long. I'd be crying all day. And she just was sympathetic to me instead of, you know, the tough jail girl type of person.
Right.
I would call my sister-in-law during the day, how long am I going to have to be here? Is anybody going to get me out? And she's like, I'm working on it. So behind the scenes, she was working on getting me out.
Yeah.
But nobody else was.
Wow.
So she was the one there for me again.
Yeah. Wow.
So even though there was a lot of things that she created, issues for me,
right,
you know, and stuff, she was still the one that showed up.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Amen.
In so many ways. So I was in there for 7 days. In 7 days, I had my, I was in front of the judge for bail to see if I would get bail or not. At first, they said no because of who they thought I was.
Oh, gotcha.
And so I was just like crushed. And then the attorney that I had, which was just, one that they give to you.
Yeah.
He finally got them to get me to allow for me to get out if somebody put up bail. And it was quite a bit of money. Well, one of the rich guys, that was kind of like a sugar daddy in a sense, was there. He showed up to my court date, but Linda did not. She wanted to go, and she had to go get drugs and gamble that day. So that was kind of like the first inkling of maybe she's not always here.
Oh, wow.
And it was a challenge for me in some ways. But I got out that day on bail, and this guy, who was a very much older guy, probably in his 70s or 80s.
Okay.
Platonic, nothing like
right.
weird was happening before. But that night, he would not take me to my brother's house. He insisted I go to his house with him, and he'll take me in the morning. So we go there, and he tries to rape me.
No.
And he attacks me. And I'm like, please stop. I just got out of this traumatic 7 days of being in jail. Can you please just like leave me alone and let me be? And so he finally backed off. And he did take me home the next day. So thankfully it didn't, I think I probably could have taken it maybe one. But still, it was like, I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening? It was just one thing after the other.
And still not crying out to God.
No.
So at what point do we get to that point? Like, because, most of the time people are like, I had to hit rock bottom, which that was true for me. But you still haven't hit rock bottom yet. Girl.
You would have thought jail would have been rock bottom, honestly.
And
I thought it was at the time.
Yeah.
Long story short, I ended up getting to where I could, I had to do some community service. They found out it wasn't as rough as I thought. I got an attorney that got me just all the charges dropped to one. It was writing a bad check or something like that. I had to pay back the checks. I had to do the community service. In the meantime, while all of this happened, my brother was supposed to re-enlist in the military, and he just decides not to. Okay. And he decides instead to go to aeronautics school in Tulsa. Of all the places, we'd been in California this whole time. Right. So that was like, what the heck is happening now? Because I never expected him to move the family to Tulsa. And so he stayed around with me till I finished my community service. Everybody else had flown to Tulsa. So my sister-in-law, when she's in Tulsa, she's like, listen, Angie, there's no good drugs here. Can you go buy some meth, and can you mail it to me through the mail? Yeah, I was stupid again, because I'd already had this. Tell me you
said no.
I said yes.
Girl.
She taught me how to mail it in a proper way where the dogs would not, it was bad. So I do this. I don't get they didn't find out. I ended up taking a bunch of drugs on the plane with me, wrapped up the same way. To bring to her whenever we finally got, things going and we were going to head to Tulsa. Because I went to Tulsa because I didn't know what else to do. Right. I had nowhere else to go. Right. So let's continue. So we get there. I ended up getting into drugs. We found drugs there. Okay. There are drugs in Tulsa after all. There's crystal meth there too. So things kept going on, but I had to get a job because I didn't have the rich friends around me anymore. Right. So I get this job, and there's a girl there that ends up getting hired to work under me.
Okay.
I said, when they asked me my opinion, I said, no, I don't want her to work for me. She was too bubbly and too happy.
Yeah.
And she was annoying to me.
Yeah.
And so, but they went over me and still hired her.
Okay.
And she went to church. She was raised by a single mama who loved Jesus. And so she just kind of started playing Christian music in the back where we worked, which was really annoying to me. And she started being really nice to me, and she was annoying to me, and I just wanted nothing to do with her, and I was really cold to her in a lot of ways and everything, but she just kept being persistent and just kept being nice to me. And just little by little, I started hanging out with her a little bit more and hanging out with Linda a little bit less.
Gotcha.
And Linda did not like that because I was no longer her go-to, do whatever you want me to girl. I was starting to say no to her a little bit, and that was causing conflict between us.
Yeah.
And she was not liking it.
Wow.
So Amber, the girl that was befriending me, she came over one day. She knocked on the door. I had like some alcohol in my hand. I had just taken a hit and stuff.
Yeah.
And she came over, and she's like, and I kind of looked at her, and I'm just like, oh crud, what do I do? Because I've got this alcohol. She's like, go ahead and keep drinking. It's okay. And she just smiled, not judging me at all or anything. She's like, I just came to see how you were doing and just hang out for a little bit. And I was like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And so, as I mentioned, eventually, Linda was getting more and more upset because I was spending more time less with her, doing less of what she wanted. So then Amber was like, one day she was like, hey, my mom asked if you'd like to come and live with us. And I never met her mom before, but I'm sure she heard about me.
I'm sure she did.
And then I was very upfront with Amber. I do, I like to party. I've been to church, and I don't want to go back there.
Yeah.
I'm done with that lifestyle. It's not for me. It didn't work for me. And
because this is working so well.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. And so she was like, so when she said that, I'm like, no. I just kind of laughed at her, and I'm like, no, because I know I can't do drugs in your house.
Yeah.
So why would I want to live there?
Right.
And stuff. So then one day, that was about a week later, my sister-in-law called me at work. She was really upset for some reason. And she's like, get your stuff. It'll be on the lawn when you get home. And so she kicked me out of the house. So Amber's like, come and stay with us. And I'm like, no. And she's like, just stay with us a couple of days till you figure out where to go. So I'm like, well, that sounds better than, sleeping in my car tonight.
Right.
So Amber comes with me to get all my stuff, and we go to her house. And so her mom's there. She greets me with this big smile. She's like, I'm so happy you're here. She sits me down that night, and she's like, look, I don't want anything from you at all. For your rent, you can keep your money. I don't want money. And she could have used it because she was a single mom that was struggling and everything. And she's like, for your rent, all I want is for you to go to church with us. That's your rent. And so I'm like, okay, but I didn't really take it seriously.
Right. Until
that Sunday when they physically were pulling me out of bed to go to church. And so I started going to church with them. They literally had to kind of grab me at first and to, Angie, come on, it's time to get up. You got to get up. You promised. This is your rent. This is what you need to do. And so in a loving way, it didn't feel obviously forceful, even though it was forceful.
Right.
And so I went to church with them, started going 3 to 4 times. And by the 4th time, Amber was also involved with the youth ministry. It was a huge youth ministry.
Okay.
It was Church on the Move in Tulsa. Okay. They have a youth ministry. It's 180 that became one of the biggest ones in the United States for a time period. They had like the bowling alley, the pinball or the game machines, a store and a restaurant, and just it was like a club without the alcohol. Honestly, it was like really cool. And so Amber became an intern there. And so every once in a while, I would go a couple of times here or there. I wasn't required to or anything, though. Right. So this one particular time, I was really tired from being at work and everything. So I just told her, I'm not going to go to the youth meeting tonight. I'm just going to go home. But then before I got home, I just found myself driving there.
Oh, wow.
And just subconsciously started going there and just had this desire to go there. So I went to the youth meeting. They were in the middle of praise and worship and everything. And then immediately after I walk in the door, the youth pastor stops the praise and worship. And he says, somebody's here that needs to be delivered of drugs and alcohol, and just kind of read my mail of what I've been going through and everything. And he said, get up here right now. God has something new for you. And so I'm running up there. I'm bawling my eyes out. Don't even know what hit me right yet.
Wow.
And so Amber's running behind me and everything. And there were probably about maybe 25 to 30 people that went forward, though, during that time of just youth. And so he laid hands on me. And from that moment, literally, I was delivered of drugs and alcohol and never touched them again.
Wow.
And I joke about it so much right now because it delivered me so much. I can't even have caffeine.
Wow.
So no stimulant whatsoever, or it just sets me off the edge. So
wow.
That was my first real encounter. Well, actually, back up. My first real encounter with Jesus was her mom.
Really?
She was like the first Jesus I
like
ever
Jesus
seen
with
in a
skin on.
sense. Yes.
Yeah.
In that she took me in like I was her daughter from day one.
Wow.
She treated me the same at Christmas, treated me the same at holidays, treated me the same with, if she gave her daughter $20 to go out, she gave me $20 to go out.
Wow.
And it was like as if I was hers.
Wow.
From that moment. And that spoke so much to me.
Yeah.
Somebody that didn't know me but knew enough to me, I could have stolen from her.
Yeah.
I could have taken advantage of the situation.
Right.
I mean, she doesn't know what she would have gotten herself into, potentially, but she knew so strongly she was supposed to do that, and God told her to have me in there. And just that act of obedience was so ministering to me. I'd never experienced anything like that before.
Yeah. Wow, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
So you get born again, and I know there's so much more to the story. But at what point did you start getting into the Word?
So about a year later we moved. Amber, I had a job in Tulsa, and this was during the era of, there was a lot of radio, ministers on radio.
Yeah.
And so Tulsa, is like everybody comes to Tulsa. Kenneth Copeland, Jessie Duplantis, Jerry Savelle, like all of the greats.
Yeah.
Joyce Myers, goes there and everything. So we would go to the maybe Center, which was at Oral Roberts University, and we would listen to all of these teachers. So I started getting fed great teachings and started learning. But I was also in a job where it was work where I could listen to the radio all day long.
Okay.
So all I did was listen to the radio and listen to teachings all day long.
Wow.
And I'd always just be in church all the time, and I couldn't get enough.
Wow, that's
of the
so
teaching
amazing.
and everything. And so
were you in the Word though?
Yes.
Okay.
In 180, they have this discipleship program, and they have like a challenge to get through the Word in, I don't remember how long, but I read the whole entire Bible for the first time.
Okay.
And I went through their 180 classes, so I was getting discipled that way too. So I was just all into the Word, all into teachings. I had worship on, and it was just, that was all I was feeding on.
Wow.
Was the Word. And so, which was incredible.
Yeah.
But I still wasn't fully understanding a relationship with God at that point yet.
Right.
But I was just so hungry. So I was learning and everything. And so I was listening to Joyce Meyer teaching, and she was talking about how they were hiring in St. Louis. Okay. And so I told Amber about it, and I'm like, I would like to apply for this. And she's like, I'd like to apply for it too, because she loved her also. So we both applied to it, and she got the job and I didn't. Okay. But I told her I would move to St. Louis with her because I didn't really have anything, tied. I didn't have any ties really to Tulsa other than great memories of what just had taken place. Right. And stuff in a great church to go to. So we moved to St. Louis together, and then found another church. We had talked to Joyce Meyer Ministries if they had recommendations, found a really good word church with 𝗵𝗵𝗶𝗀 Bible teachers in it and everything. And so that kind of started the second chapter of my life.
Wow. And we're still in the second chapter, or would you, no, definitely. Yeah, there's a whole nother section. So maybe that's what we'll have to do when we have you back is chapter 2.
Yes, but I did start on a journey of, Tulsa has a really sweet spot in my heart.
Amen.
In Church on the Move, and Willie George is the pastor, or was, I think his son pastors it now. It just was really pivotal, along with Amber and her family, in my life to lead me in the right direction and to actually start learning what I never knew.
Right. So through the years of being in the Word, I mean, Did you see residual effects of like the breakdown of your relationship with your parents and with your brother? Have you had a renewed sense of relationship with your brother or your parents at all?
Yeah, actually my brother, you know, I caused, you know, I caused a division, you know, between him and my sister-in-law a lot, because she was spending more time with me than she was with him.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so there was absolutely a division. I feel like I really betrayed him in a lot of ways, because I used to say, if you guys get divorced, I would go with her.
Right.
You know, which
like
was not cool.
I would go with her, not you.
I would hang out with her.
Yeah.
I would choose to, like, because she was a sister to me more than he was a brother to me.
Right.
In my eyes, a lot of ways. And so, you know, so I did go to him, you know, and apologize, and just really had a really good talk. And we've got a great relationship right now. Yeah. So it's been completely restored. He's a great brother, and we constantly are in contact. He comes out here to see me and stuff like that. So
what about you and your parents?
With my dad, he actually, in, I think it was around 2016-ish or so, he passed away. We actually were estranged for probably about 20 years. Wow. A lot of it is a different story that had a lot to do with his wife and everything as well. But when he got diagnosed, he was diagnosed with cancer. When he got diagnosed with cancer, we actually had a good talk. We did reconcile. You know, the last part, probably 6 months of his life, were really good. And, you know, he apologized for a lot of things that he knew he had played a part in and everything. And so it ended good. With my mom, she's still around, so we have a pretty good relationship. And everything is good. Not a lot is, she doesn't really believe in a lot of things that she may have taken part in, I guess.
Right.
You know, hasn't really opened up to that.
Right.
But
well, only God can reveal it.
Yeah.
You know, and stuff like that. I think we can push stuff down, or maybe we are just completely ignorant of it. Right? Of the type of person we are, maybe how we were raised, or what our idea of love is.
Absolutely.
You know, so it can be like, oh, I didn't do anything wrong, you know?
Yeah.
And so then what about Kyle and your daughter?
So I haven't seen Kyle for years.
Okay.
It's probably a good thing.
Right.
Whenever my daughter did turn 18, which was 4 or 5, no, it's been a while. It's been about 10 years ago or so. When she was 18, I wrote a letter to her. She actually went to the top art school in the United States. Wow. And I was an art major too, which is very interesting. You know, how even though not being together, she still had that part and everything. And so I had her address at the school. Okay. And I did send her a piece of artwork and a letter with a journal and everything. And she reached out to me on Facebook, and she did reject me. She she didn't want anything. She was like, you know, I've heard the story from my dad, you know. And
I'm sure that was
so
a great
story.
So
you know, so I just, it is what it is. And
we just keep believing God. Listen, girl, I mean, truth can be revealed.
Yeah.
And so if we put our faith in Him, He'll bring it to pass. Yeah. Because nothing is impossible to them that believe.
That's true.
Praise God.
True. Right on.
And so I would just encourage you, I would love for you to minister to the audience that maybe they're going through something and they want it to be fixed overnight. Yeah. And you know, the whole idea of this episode was that it's a process.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, the only thing that was not a process in your life was getting delivered from alcohol and drugs.
Yeah. But, I know, and the thing is, I expected everything to happen like that happened.
Right.
Didn't quite work out that way.
Because
it's true.
Yeah, and the audience needs to know too that Angelus, you've gone through a major healing journey, and that's part of chapter 2 that we will definitely go through. But I think we so what would you say to somebody that is like, well, I want it to all happen right now?
Firstly, I would say to cry out to God, which was the thing I didn't do. Obviously, I think for some of us, we go around the mountain longer than we need to. And my journey my process did not need to take as long as it did, of course. But yeah, absolutely. Just take one step and then the next step. If you are waiting for like something to happen and it doesn't happen instantly, just don't be discouraged. Because like even now I'm going through things and it's just take one step and just like spend that time in silence. And that's where the still small voice is. And that's where you get direction for the next step.
That's so powerful.
And I wish I would have known that back then.
Yeah.
But
right.
We're growing. Get better and better every day, so
Amen,
it's okay.
Amen. We learn a little bit more.
Right.
Hopefully, we learn a little bit more every single day. I must ask this as we're closing out: is what is your favorite part of what you're doing right now in this ministry?
Yeah. I think it's being a part of the creative process, because I feel like God called me to be a creator, and I think the devil has tried to steal that away so many times.
Yeah.
And to see that it's actually happening, and I am, it's not visual art creating, which is what I went to school for, but like it's still creating and telling stories and helping people to like see the real Jesus.
Amen.
But not in a conventional way where like we're not being ministers like a conventional teaching or pastors, but through all of the shows that we're doing, we're able to like reach so many people and to like be creative in that way, and I love that.
Oh, that's so great. So would you ever have imagined in your growing up years that you would be in this position?
No. I never imagined. For one, in chapter 2, I said I would never work for a ministry,
Exactly.
And so here we are. So I would never imagine that. I would have never imagined. Yeah, I just felt like I was just gonna barely survive.
Yeah.
A lot of times instead of thrive, and I feel like once I came to Charis and I learned more, I'm becoming into that thriving.
That's so good. That's so good. And I want to encourage everybody watching, if you've gone through something and maybe what you've heard from Angelus today has really plucked your heart and you're crying out to God, please give our prayer ministers a call. They are there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So no matter what time you're watching this episode, call them now at 719-635-1111. And don't only get prayer from them, but they can give you supplemental teaching. We have a website that has over 200,000 hours of free teaching on there, and sometimes we got to get a hold of our mind when we're going through these difficult things. We also offer a free booklet for you that we would love for you to go to CharisUnpluggedGTN.com and take advantage of that offer. Okay, it's all about nurturing your personal relationship with God and understanding who God has created you to be. But you have to take that step, and that's how the kingdom of God works. So, Angelus, thank you so much for being on the program today. Man, that was awesome, and we'll have you back for chapter 2. It's so great, because God's redemptive power is available no matter how much of a mess you've gotten yourself in. Praise God.
Right on.
So, you guys, thanks for watching, and remember that when you unplug from this world and you plug into the Word of God, your life will change, and then you'll change the world.